Hello and welcome to the Music Crew Virtual Conference 2023. I'm so excited that you're here today, and I hope you are enjoying the sessions going on. I'm Beth from Beth's Music Classroom. I just finished my 16th year of teaching music, mostly in grades K to 3. My session today is called Experiential Music Theory, teaching children difficult concepts using relatable explanations. If you haven't picked up the handout for this session, you can find it in my TPT store or in the video description below. As a music teacher, I just love seeing my students come in each day smiling and excited. I remember that same feeling when I was a kid, whether we were learning a new song, playing instruments, or just about anything. My students enter the music room now with that same enthusiasm, and I want it to last all through the lesson. I love teaching music theory with an experiential mindset. Okay, now this is just a term that I've sort of coined. It's nothing exact or specific, but what I mean by it is to use engaging, playful, imaginative activities that help relate music to an experience that young students already know. So rather than teaching the more abstract musical concepts by memorizing words and definitions, it involves creating a lesson that begins with something they already know, an experience. And it works for them. And it's similar to the Kodai method of prepare, present, practice, but more on that later. So let's look at the why, the reason I teach with this experiential mindset. I've found that students react and learn so well from this approach. Play and imagination are so important for children. I love quotes, and this one is great by Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. When children pretend, they're using their imaginations to move beyond the bounds of reality. A stick can be a magic wand. A sock can be a puppet. A small child can be a superhero. Or I would add that a classroom could be turned into an airport, an apple orchard, a science lab, or a kitchen. So we are required to teach our students a curriculum and standards, but how we teach it is really up to us. Every single day, my students, especially kindergartners, they want to tell me a story about their pet, birthday, bus ride, what they ate for lunch, and way more. For children, everything is experience-based, and their experience at 5 or 6 years old is very limited. Children need help to visualize a concept in terms of what they understand and know. Using those already known ideas or experiences hooks students right from the beginning, and they get excited and engaged. So how can we as music educators incorporate more play, imagination, and students' experiences into our music theory lessons? Well, when you're planning for a musical concept or a specific unit, first think through what experiences and activities you could use to illustrate the new content. So will you use activities that are oral, visual, kinesthetic, or tactile? Maybe more than one of those even. Could you use props, manipulatives, games, a costume, maybe a different room arrangement, or anything else to help ignite the student's imagination? Then begin planning your lesson out. Think about how you will add it into the lesson. Earlier, I mentioned the 3 Ps of the Kodai method: prepare, present, practice. And this lesson will be similar. So first, talk about the real-life experience or activity with students. This is something they are already familiar with. This is the preparation stage. After thorough experience, then they are ready to see how this relates to the actual musical concept. Presentation. Finally, the rest of the activities serve as a practice. Now you're using the music vocabulary and the definitions that they already learned. So, are you ready to go and see some specific examples for how to use these in the classroom? Let's talk about tempo. In kindergarten, first grade, I am just teaching students to differentiate between fast and slow, especially in kindergarten. In later grades, they will learn the Italian terms, presto, largo, etc. But when I introduce fast and slow, I love using puppets or animals, stuffed animals. I show them a cheetah for very fast and a turtle for very slow. And then in first grade, they learn those animals' names, presto and largo. With second and third grade, I love using a lot of games when they're practicing the big kid tempo words. So I love using matchbox cars and speed limit signs to help them recognize that tempo is like speed and the speed limit. After they can recognize the speed limit for each term, then they get to play more games. The speed limit game is something that I add to my tempo stations each year. Tempo twister is another fun one. Students take a turn, normally in a group of 3 or 4. They will spin the wheel or choose a card, and whatever goes on, they have to know that Italian word or that matching definition to put their foot or hand on it. They love it. Another great game is Tempo Four Corners by Cilio Music. I use hula hoops for my small groups, and they have to listen to determine the tempo. It's an elimination game, and kids love it. Here are some other games, matching games and memory, and some interactive games on the computers. Well, now let's go on to form, musical form. When I talk about form with my second and third graders, I don't start with A-B form or rondo right away. No, I start with something they already know and they can relate to, and that is sandwiches. Yes, I said sandwiches because every kid knows what a sandwich is and they've experienced them before. So I tell them a story and they get so quiet and they love it. And it's a true story. When I was a little girl, I used to go visit my great-grandma, Nona. She used to make me a peanut butter sandwich with 1 slice of bread and peanut butter. No second slice on top. I would ask her, "Where's the top?" And she would say in her Italian accent, "No top, it's better that way." Well, my mom made sandwiches a little differently when I was young. Bread, peanut butter, and a second piece of bread on the top. They were both yummy but very different sandwiches. But I'm grown up now, so I love making a club sandwich. Bread, turkey, bread, bacon, bread. That's 3 pieces of bread. It's a triple decker. Well, what am I doing with the students with this story? We're talking about form. And eventually we'll relate each ingredient to a letter. And we always want to start with bread. We always want to start with A. So we'll have students at the beginning use flashcards or visuals, and they'll make their own sandwiches and different ingredients. And we'll begin learning to tell form without using sandwiches, but ready for the letters. Another year, my district did a rock your school theme, so I decided instead of sandwiches to use rocks. So we did a rock formation activity where we used little rocks and pebbles and all kinds of fun stuff to talk about form. We looked at the different features they all had, and students made their own patterns. They had a blast, and then we took it from rocks to musical form. It was great. Now, quick note, how far you want to take this experience, it's totally up to you. For example, you could add an art element with students drawing their own sandwich ingredients or rocks, or go all out and dress up like a chef and bring real food or props to demonstrate. But it's totally fine if you just tell your class to pretend. Mr. Rogers said, "Pretending doesn't require expensive toys. The choice is up to you guys. So do what you need to do. The choice is up to you." Ready for another example? Let's talk about meter now. For so many years, I struggled teaching time signatures to my students. They just weren't getting it. As I stood in front of them one day several years ago, I quickly tried to think of how I could relate this to a real-life example that they may have experienced. Okay, let's try again, I said with hope. Meter reminds me of traveling on an airplane, I said to them. When I finished explaining what I meant, I could see in their eyes that they finally understood it. Before that, I was just reminding them that a quarter note gets one beat, and the top number in a time signature tells the number of beats in a measure, and so on. And I'm pretty sure that they were just hearing wah, 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 like on Charlie Brown. From that day on, the way I teach time signatures has always been using an airplane experience. Well, let's take a look at what I mean. For this lesson, I dress as a flight attendant with a navy skirt, blouse, hat, scarf, gloves, and a clipboard that says Meter Airlines. When my class arrives, I greet them out in the hallway, take attendance, and pass out tickets as students enter the classroom. I start right away with a presentation called Come Fly with Meter and play the first 12 to 15 seconds of Sinatra's Come Fly With Me. My students are totally confused, yet intrigued, and I have their total attention. I introduce them to our pretend airport and passengers and make a story out of each person buying their tickets and finding a seat in the plane. Each person has a different note on their shirt, but we don't talk about that yet. For example, my students love meeting Muscle Man Mike, who's a half note, who is willing to buy 2 tickets for each of his muscles, or the twins, Will and Jill, 2 eighth notes, who are so small they can share a seat. For each row of the plane, there are different flight attendants with time signatures on their jackets, but we don't talk about it yet. Rather, students are just observing these relationships to the musical vocabulary. Once everybody has a seat, there's one left over. Throw it overboard, right? I tell my students. As I pretend to pick it up and throw it out the window, they all yell, no! So it's a discussion of it's okay to have an empty seat because it's just a rest. Well, the next day, I help them understand the big kid words. I show them how the passengers stood for different note values, and the flight attendants showed how many seats or beats there were in each row, the time signature. Then we dive into more of the music vocabulary and definitions while relating it back to the airport. Finally, they're ready to begin practicing meter. Use lots of different types of activities in this practice, like figuring out what passenger could fill the rest of the row, or what flight attendant should be there. That would be early practice, as you're just learning the big kid names. Next, include activities where you would determine the time signature or draw in the bar lines to match that time signature. And later practice higher level activities like listening to find the meter of a piece or moving to the strong and weak beats of music. There's so many different activities you can do. Here are some of the meter games that I use with my stations. With most, they practice matching the rhythms to a time signature. One of my students' favorites is the fishing game and meter ball. In meter ball, they are listening to a piece, determining the meter, and then matching their movements with the basketball, bouncing on the strong beat, beat 1. And then there's other activities that go for beat 2, 3, and 4. You can access this freebie with the link in your handout. So I have a copy for you. Another activity that's great for meter and practicing those strong and weak beats is conducting. These conducting patterns are great to even trace out with their finger and then add it to the actual conducting patterns. This is one that I also use in my stations. So now let's talk about pitch and melodic contour. There are lots of examples and experiences that you can use with this. When teaching high versus low, I use a piece called Fairies and Giants from Wand of Youth Suite by Elgar. It's such a cute piece. It goes back and forth between the high fairies and the low giants. Comparing the two is helpful for young students. Another great one from the Carnival of the Animals is Aviary, and I have a little bird puppet that I use for this, and the elephant, also from the Carnival of the Animals, which has the big double bass. So you're talking about the double bass elephant versus the flute bird. And they're great to use puppets for these too, and young students will just love this. There are so many great children's books to use as well. I love the book Mortimer. Use step bells to demonstrate Mortimer's family going up and down the stairs in the story. Up, Up, Down is another one, also by Munch. It's perfect for vocal exploration. And there's two great books by Marin Marca, where she introduces the staff with high and low. Here comes the high notes. Look out for low notes. They're perfect for young students. Now let's look at articulation. It's a slightly more advanced element of music, but you can still teach it to elementary students. Just use real-life examples to help them understand terms like staccato, legato, accented, fermata, glissando, etc. Try to get them up and moving to show the style. Use scarves, maybe a parachute, and rather than giving them a formal definition of it, just play an example, and students can move their scarf to show it. I love using food too. Students love food. So I have an activity, a lesson that's all about ice cream in May, June. And we talk about sprinkles as staccato and hot fudge sauce coming down as legato. You can use food or weather themes. There's so many different articulation examples you can use. Sound stories or books or poems to help them experience articulation in a new way. Each winter, I have an ice skating themed day with activities all geared around that theme, and ice skating is just right for experiencing articulation. First, legato, as you're relating it to skating around the ice so smoothly. Then staccato happens when the skater's toe pick digs into the ice. Fermata, when they bow and wave at the end of their performance and stand there so happy. As you try to incorporate some experiential music theory into your classroom, think about puppets, props, and books that you could use to help illustrate the concept easily. Don't forget to think through your composer list and their compositions. One of my composers is Camille Saint-Saëns, who wrote The Carnival of the Animals. It's a perfect piece to talk about the different elements of music. It works well with any grade, and it is filled with all of these wonderful music theory examples. So it's a suite of 14 little pieces, and I'm going to go through each of these elements of music and tell you how I use them with my classroom. So dynamics, finale versus cuckoo. Finale, all of the animals are there at once, making noise, saying farewell, fortissimo, or with your kindergartners, you just may say, it's very loud. The cuckoo is so different. It's just this tiny little bird that sings his 2 notes at night, pianissimo. With tempo, talk about the wild donkeys or the swift animals, playful and very fast, presto. as compared to the tortoise, who is very slowly dancing to the can-can. Largo. Form. Compare the Royal March of the Lions in an ABA form and the fossils ABACA form or rondo. Meter, persons with long ears, or the cuckoo, both of those are in 3/4 time signature, but the lion and the aquarium, they're both in 4/4 time signature. Pitch, we mentioned before aviary, the elephant, those are both two great ones for pitch. And melodic contour, pianists, is moving a lot by steps because it's all scales. And persons with long ears is moving by these giant leaps. Articulation, the jumpy staccato kangaroos, compared to the swan, who's smooth and sliding legato. Students are often more likely to remember a funny story, an animal, a puppet, or a unique activity than just the musical concept itself. Help them relate music theory concepts to an experience and use something they already know. See what works for you and your students and your classroom, and have fun with it. Thanks so much for listening to my session, and I really hope that you are able to use some of these ideas in your own lessons and classroom. If you have any questions, you can leave your comment in the post in the Music Crew Collaborative Facebook group. I would love to connect with you. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, email, blog, or TPT. If you haven't already, be sure to get the handout for this session. It's free in my TPT store, and inside it you'll find the notes, freebies, and lots of helpful links. My entire TPT store, Beth's Music Classroom, will be 20% off from July 20th to the 22nd. Also, I'm having a giveaway, so use the link in your handout to enter by July 28th. To see all of the links and items that I mentioned today, go to bit.ly/funmusictheory. The link is here, and you can also scan the QR code. You just have to make sure that you type it in as it shows there, and you'll be able to get a lot of information there. Be sure to check out the virtual exhibit hall for links to some of the best resources the Music Crew has to offer. You can find lots of different topics to get you and your students ready for the fall or any time of year. Thanks so much for attending my session, and enjoy the rest of the conference.